This episode ends with me at the top of a mountain. But why?
So jump starting a cell phone.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That's an excellent title for the thing. So let's do that.
Today we're jump starting a cell phone.
Alright.
In 2012, I released all of Season 2 of Funny Hacks in 3D. A few of the episodes even covered some of the methods that I used for doing this. I did it entirely using off-the-shelf 2D equipment and adapters that I created myself.
One fly, and I think it took us about 15 minutes to get it.
I did a lot in that time and I was really happy with how it went. But there's one little itch which I've been wanting to do ever since then and never quite got to. And that is to do long-distance 3D photography, basically a giant's perspective of the world. And to achieve that, you separate the eyes by a much greater distance than you would normally. But that comes with its own sets of challenges that need to be solved. There are several different ways of achieving 3D perception. So for this video, I'm focusing on stereographic 3D, and I'm going to be portraying that in either anaglyph or wigglegram. But first, let's have a quick look at a stereographic anaglyph. Ah! Wrong hand. So now you're looking at the smiley face version of me. First off, I have the separation way too extreme here. Normally you want it much closer than this, but it's excellent for demonstrating the point. Everything that is red is what the left eye is seeing. Everything that is cyan is what the right eye is seeing. And everything that is a mixture of red and cyan is common between the left and the right eye. Notice how when the right coloured object is close to you, the red is on the right, and how when it's far away from you, the red is on the left. And when it's in the middle, the two things overlap and it's basically white. Also notice that dark objects, like the monitors in the background, they're the exact opposite. If you had some red cyan glasses, you would actually be able to see this scene in 3D. It's a little bit too extreme, but you would be able to see it. While anaglyph is my favourite and what I tend to use for myself, there are probably not many people in my audience who have anaglyph glasses. So to make it so that everyone can see it easily without having to mess around with settings, I'm going to do the remaining shots in this video as wigglegrams. However, I'm also including several versions of these shots on Patreon so that you can see the shots in your preferred format.
This project originally had a much wider scope, but time is very much against me. Let's have a quick overview of what I'm trying to do. I have my camera here. This is my one that I use for my main episodes. Originally, I was going to have these rollers here, and they were going to go on top of the rail like this. I will very likely end up with that solution, but today this introduces a few challenges which are probably going to be counterproductive to the time I have available. So what the brainwave is, I'm not going to use the bar. I'm not going to make a special mount or anything like that. I'm not going to take any of those extra supports. I'm literally going to take multiple tripods. I'm going to take this level, and I'm going to take this bar. It's a bit heavier than the other ones, but it's really rigid, so I can at least get consistent results. So I'm literally going to do this between the different tripods. I'm going to take probably three tripods, and I'm literally going to make sure that they're all at the same height by doing this. Now, there is one downside to doing this, and that is that if I was to put the camera on a mount which would go directly onto the bar, I should have no trouble making sure that the roll of every camera is correct. But if I'm just using this to get the tripods at the same height, I do have to go to extra effort to make sure that these tripods individually are oriented correctly. That will take a bit more work, but I think it'll be worth it for the simplicity. This really isn't how I imagined I was going to solve this. Oh well, I think I have a plan, so let's do it.
So it was time to pack the bags, pack the bike, and head off to the mountain. I was carrying a lot of equipment, a lot of food, and a lot of water, so this was quite a slow ascent this time. All in all, I spent 4 hours up there. 3 of those were on the first shot. I began by getting these 3 tripods to roughly the same height, but after doing that, I then needed to make sure that they were roughly in the right direction this way. Now that I've done that, that has interfered with the height, and so therefore I need to do the height again. So that's what I'm going to do now. I took the shots. I've just finished taking the shots that I wanted to take. As far as I can tell, they all went to plan, but I'll have to see when I actually get them onto the computer. It took way longer than I expected. 3 hours! Although everything went according to plan as far as I can tell. So of the 2 shots that I took up there, the 3-hour one came out very well. The alignment was incredible. I didn't expect to get it that good. However, I took so freaking long doing it that the clouds moved and the sun moved. So it still looks really good, but it could look better. The second shot I rushed. The sun was going down, and so I was trying to get the shot very quickly, and I'm not sure that there's anything that I didn't mess up. I messed up the exposure. I even got the exposure inconsistent between the two shots because the lighting changed in between the two shots. I messed up the focus. I messed up the alignment. Basically, I messed up the second shot. Let's just pretend it doesn't exist. It is very much time for me to get back down the mountain. It is cold. It is getting dark, and hopefully those photos have worked out. I originally thought that my story was going to end here, but there's so much more that I can do with this. So, I headed up to another mountain. This ride was also rushed. This was just before a thunderstorm, so I really needed to get the shots in quickly, and I wasn't sure when I was going to get good enough weather again. This time I did away with the bar. Its whole purpose was to make sure I got the tripods at the same height, but for long distance photography, as long as it's fairly close, the height doesn't matter quite as much. And when I say fairly close, I mean within a few centimetres. You can eyeball it and get it close enough. I didn't even bother with multiple tripods. I just used a single tripod with the camera permanently attached to it, and then just moved the entire setup between the shots. I took a few shots on this trip, one of them was usable, and I was very happy with that. But my success rate was nowhere near good enough yet. So on the next trip, I went for a walk. However, it was only when I got to the destination that I realised that I'd actually forgotten the mounting bracket for my tripod. So my tripod was effectively useless. I didn't want to waste the walk that I'd just done, so I thought, stuff it, let's try handheld. And I nailed every shot. This changes everything, because not only did I get every shot first try, I was also able to do them massively quicker. At this particular stage, I was spending a few minutes per shot. That's compared to 3 hours before. However, while I was still on the side of the hill, I didn't know this yet. So I thought, just for fun, let's just try doing the same thing with my phone. Phone quality aside, one of the two shots that I did worked. Unfortunately, I can't actually show that because of privacy, but there are more phone shots later in this episode. This is probably a good moment to talk about how I'm getting the shots. This is a whole video by itself, and that's available on Patreon. When doing 3D footage, you need to be aware of your convergence point. A really good way to think about this is, what is the thing that you want the viewer to be focusing on right at this moment? That is the thing that should be completely neutral, so it shouldn't be popping out of the screen and it shouldn't be sunk into the screen. It should be exactly there, completely comfortable for the viewer to see. So the 3D effect is therefore provided by everything that's in the background, maybe a little bit that's in the foreground, along with a video on how to edit them. And finally, let's add the colour. Quite a few of the tutorials that I found online talked about using the colorize filter. Don't do that. With colorize, you'll have black equals black and white equals white, and only the stuff in between will be colorized towards the color that you choose. But we actually need everything the whole way along the scale to be uniformly one color or the other color. So to achieve that, we can right click on the image, go to color. But the gist of it is there's a few things that you really need to get right, and then a few things which you don't need to worry so much about. You need to get the exposure consistent between the shots, so having a camera where you can manually set the ISO, shutter speed, and aperture really helps here. You need to have as little movement as possible within the photos. So things like cars or people or clouds, all of those things need to be as still as possible. Alignment is a little bit more complicated to describe, but quite simple to do. So using the terms roll pitch or XYZ to describe the way the camera is oriented, let's just have a quick look at these things. The following things must not change. The pitch, which is whether the camera is angled up or angled down. The Z-axis, which we can also describe as being the distance away from the object in your convergence or focal point. The following things can change as long as you can fix them in the edit. And when I say as long as you can fix it in the edit, you can tolerate a few degrees, but really you want it as close as possible. So the roll, which is when the camera can turn this way. The Y-axis, which is how high the camera is. Essentially, you need the two shots to be as close together as possible. If there's a little bit of difference between them, that can add up quite quickly. A small amount is tolerable in the edit. And things that can change, the X, which I'm basically using to how much separation do you have between the two shots. You have to use a fair bit of caution in getting that right. If you have the separation too large, then it's going to be very hard for the user to look at it without going cross-eyed. If you have it too close, then you're just not going to get much perception of 3D. As a general guide, the normal distance that you want is roughly the distance between your eyes. It's only when you want to start doing really interesting long-distance photography that you might want to have a wider distance. And the yaw is an interesting one. Technically, you can be fairly inaccurate with it, and you can then correct it in your editing. In reality, the more inaccurate you have the yaw, the less of the photo you're going to be able to use after the edit. In practice, what does all this mean? The easy way to do it is to use a marker on your screen and align that to a specific object in the distance of your photo. And then when you take the second shot, do the same thing to the same object. Keep the camera as level as possible. It'll help you identify matching shots when you do the editing, and it'll help you edit the process in general. Anyway, let's continue the story. That was close. Next came the weekend where my wife and I went on a bit more of an explore, and a moment presented itself where it would be great to try some 3D shots with the phone. And then it was time for one last mountaintop excursion. We actually drove most of the way up this and then just walked the last little part of it. Partly because we wanted the exercise, and partly because the road was in too poor condition to use. This is a really interesting spot to go to, because you can see in pretty much every direction as long as you don't mind a few obstacles in the way. But for this exercise we need a view that is obstacle-free, which leaves us with 2 directions. This has been one of those really cool projects where you come in with preconceived ideas on how you're going to solve it, and then when you actually go to do it, the solution you end up with is very different and way cooler. This was supposed to be a really quick project so that I could build up a little bit of time buffer for the next big project, but I kept on seeing things I could improve and I was having too much fun, so it took a little bit longer than intended. So anyway, I'm Kevin, this is RandomKSandom. I think this is a wrap.
It's amazing how many people get freaked out by the eyes.
A dog with glowing red eyes is kind of demonic by any means.
Yeah, and to me it's just like glowing eyes, and I just thought, oh, that's
Because
so
you know
cool.
every cute puppy has glowing red eyes.
Yeah.